Welcome to Data Science Perspectives. This series focuses on analytics and data science professionals from across industry to learn about how their career unfolded, what skills they look for when hiring, and what trends they think are coming next. I'm your host, Bill Franks. Let's get to it. Welcome to this episode of Data Science Perspectives. I'm your host, Bill Franks. Today, we're going to be joined by Christine Joy, the Vice President of Business Analytics at Comcast. As has been a theme in my first two seasons, Christine's a local here in Atlanta, and over the past few years, she's seen her team grow to over 80 members. Her and her team support organizations throughout Comcast, from sales and marketing to tech ops to customer experience to finance. And over the decade that she's been there, she's routinely increased her title and responsibilities. She originally graduated from the University of Florida with a degree in advertising. She spent a couple of years working early in her career in that space before switching over to analytics exclusively. And so with that, let's welcome Christine to the show. Hey, Christine, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
What's always great, you may or may not know, but I've really been focusing in the first two seasons on Atlanta-based folks, given that KSU's here in Atlanta. And so you're yet another member of the Atlanta posse that we're bringing on to talk about analytics and data science.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So I guess, one thing I always like to learn, because everyone has their own story, what initially drew you into this entire world of analytics and data science?
Yeah, it's funny. I really didn't think I would end up in this field. I started always thinking I'd be in design, so something around maybe interior design or fashion. I did a lot of art growing up. I played the piano, but math was always something I really excelled in. And when I went to college, I thought architecture might be a good path. Maybe that kind of combines math and design. But after about 2 years, I was like, this is probably not the right path for me. I don't think this is where my passion lied. And I really wanted to get more into the business. So I ended up switching into architecture, out of architecture and into advertising, which I thought would still have a little bit of those creative elements, be able to have some design work, but a little more of a business focus. Through that, I ended up my first role at an architecture agency was a media buyer planner. And through that, you do a lot of analytics around return on investment, different test and learn opportunities as you're trying different creatives or approaches. And it was the analytics through that I loved. And that was my real segue into, wanting to have an analytics focused career. And then it was just my move. I wanted to be in Atlanta that brought me up here and brought me to Comcast.
It's funny what you mentioned in your background something that is so consistent of a theme, which is people think of analytics being such a technical, mathematical, non-creative endeavor. But the number of people who have made a career of it, who you find out are a musician or an artist or some other creative outlet, it's incredibly high, because there really is, I think it's not given the credit it's due, the creativity in analytics. And that's something I've written and talked about a lot. So it's funny to hear you as yet another example of someone who has those traits that people don't match with the field, but that actually do match with the field.
Yeah, and we ask a lot about, what hobbies do you have? We say creativity is such an important part of what we're looking for when we're hiring. So I completely agree. I think it's great in some way to have a creative outlet if you are in an analytics-based role.
It's when I was young, my creative outlet, I did do band up until a certain point, but I used to program video games. That was my fun, because it's, while there's the logic in the coding, obviously there was a lot of creativity. I had to design all the characters, pixel by pixel back then. It was, very low res, but that's what I always found was a lot of fun. But when you think about Comcast, obviously massive company and tons of analytic needs. So what are some of the various aspects of the business that you and your team have to support?
Yeah, no, that's a great question because what I love about our team in the central division here at Comcast is we get to support all the functions of the business. So we are one collective analytics group that supports everyone instead of having separate analytics groups within each function. So it allows for a lot of collaboration within our team, a lot of cross sharing of information, but a couple examples would be on the marketing side. If you think when we launch a new sale offer, and we want to know what incremental sales are we getting from that, or how is competitive pressure impacting our business? Um, Maybe things like what's the best location to invest capital as we're building out our network, or another good one may be, we're often just parsing raw text responses from customer survey data to continue to find ways to innovate customer service. So it can be just a very wide range of pretty much anything, any function of the business needs comes to our group, which is pretty cool.
What's interesting to me, that, and this is something that'll sound obvious if people haven't thought about it once you hear it, but you don't think about it. I know that a lot of people might think about analytics at a company like Comcast being focused on a lot of the classic stuff, the marketing, the finance. But when it comes to delivering cable service and internet service to millions of customers, there's a lot of operational stuff, right? I mean, not in terms of the data flow through the network and the capacity and what nodes are down and up and so forth. Is that a big component of what you all end up focusing on as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I think, outside of looking into nodes and where we're having outages and where we might want to invest time and improvements, we're also just looking at, what's the best way to get the service to the customer? So, who really needs a professional technician to come to their house? Maybe their order's very complex or we've never had service there. Who's best served by receiving, their product in the mail and using our app to walk them through that process? Do we have enough stores and locations for customers to pick up? I talked about where do we invest on building out the network. So there are so many components, around that, and even tying back to some of the competitive. Where do we need to think about investing in our network to be able to increase our speeds to stay, above competitors? So um, so many different angles, that can spread again across all the functions of the business have to work together to really make that delivery and growth for Comcast work. So just another great tie back to kind of why we have one analytics team to really help those functions bring everything together and make the right decisions.
What's great is that, some of those operationalized analytics, like when you talk about, which technician goes where. What I love about analytics like that is that they're highly impactful, yet almost completely invisible to the stakeholders, right? The technician just knows they're told to go to 123 Main Street. They don't have any idea why. And the customer just knows that somebody showed up. And if it's a successful install, everybody's happy. But, the people throughout that process may have no idea the depth of analytics that your team has done in order to make that experience positive. And so that's those little touch points over the day that add up to a good customer service rating or a bad customer service rating, which I'm sure, like most service companies, you're relentlessly focused on.
Yeah. And I do think it's, I'll say often it's humbling sometimes to think of that a company as large as Comcast, just within our central division footprint that my team supports, we have 22 million residential homes, 6 million potential businesses that we can support, and that the decisions on how the company is running within that footprint is coming out of, work done by my team. And, it's just like I said, it's pretty humbling and pretty cool that the data, how actionable it is, and how much it drives the business.
Yeah, I imagine, you've been there for a decade or so, and just knowing how much everything's evolved in the last decade in terms of both the data available, the number of sensors and so forth you have through your networks probably increased, but also the ability to capture and store and analyze that data has gone up exponentially. So, like, how much has the data that you deal with changed and increased over the years, and what kind of additional capabilities has that provided to you?
Yeah, I mean, one of the main things I talk about on the reasons I love working for Comcast in interviews, people always say kind of, what's the favorite thing? What's the most challenging thing? And they're always one and the same. And the favorite thing is, how fast Comcast moves, how innovative they are. I had Comcast service, going back to when I first moved out in college, and I've been with them since, long before I worked here. But going back to that time, they were more of a traditional cable company, and just seeing the evolution, especially how accelerated it's been over the last 10 years, and products coming out around mobile and Flex and X-Fi Complete and our Internet Essentials programs, and so many cool new innovative things. As I mentioned with internet speeds earlier, I remember in Atlanta when Google Fiber came, and it was like before they even could start to lay their first bit of fiber, we're like, okay, you're launching a gig, we'll launch 2 gigs. Comcast is just so willing to move fast and be innovative. And that's what makes it really exciting to work here. What can be challenging is with so many mergers and acquisitions and new products, there is a lot of data. Um, but what I think people would be really surprised with coming into Comcast is really how clean some of our data is. And a lot of that has developed over the last, I mean, really probably more in the last 5 years, where we have huge teams at headquarters dedicated to building out clean semantic layers, building out documentation and data dictionaries, setting up support calls for if analysts have questions. So it is very large and very complex. We're always learning, having to find new sources, integrating new information, but there's just such a support system that I think people would be really impressed. And then as far as kind of the type of work we've done, I mean, we've really shifted from 10 years ago when I first came in the team. It was really creating that layer of foundational reporting. Um, and now we've kind of got all that. We have the reports where you can see how many connects did we get yesterday, how often are we having to send a truck to someone's house to fix a repair issue. We have all of that foundational reporting. So now it's into the fun stuff around complex analytics and trying to really guide that next strategic decision. So um, what I'm most proud of with our team is really the brand that we've built on. We don't ask for requirements from our stakeholders. We really just ask what's changing in the business, and we get to be prescriptive to them on, is this an analytic, how complex it is, do we need to build productionalized reporting? So I think from the products Comcast offers, the data availability, the type of work we've done, and just kind of the brand our team's built, the last 10 years has been just a great trajectory.
We know you just made a really, really important point. I've written in the past about the need for analytics teams, even when they're internal to an organization like yours. If you're going to be optimally successful, you really have to think of yourself as a internal consulting firm. And what you just described is really that, right? You're not waiting for someone to come and give you an order for analytics. You're out there with you and your team proactively saying, where might analytics be needed? And then trying to hit that demand. That's a great philosophy that I'd encourage anybody who watches this to think about for their organization. Let's shift gears a little bit. Talk a little more about you specifically, your background. If you had to pick a trait or skill that you think most has helped you be successful in this world, what has it been?
So for me, probably organization is my top one. I'm very organized. I'm great with follow through. Really just trying to make sure things get over the finish line and delivered. I've also done a lot of volunteering. So when changes are happening in the business, raising my hand to say, how can I grow as a part of this, or how can I help as a part of this? But I kind of back to the follow through, I think it's so important to bring ideas to the table, but even more important to make sure they get delivered. So, the business is going to need to make decisions. And if you don't scope appropriately, what you want to deliver to help them make their decisions. And your timelines are much, much longer. They may move on. So,
Right.
I think that's a part of it too, is just making sure you're delivering the value, getting it over the finish line and in a timely fashion for what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I know a lot of examples over the years where you see somebody who's developed what really was a great analysis, but they took so much time to perfect it and get it right that they actually missed the window for it to be useful. And in the end, they would have been better served, and the organization would have been better served if they delivered their half-baked solution a month earlier when the decision had to be made, because it still could have helped the decision be a little bit better. But that timeliness, that's so so critical, and it sounds so obvious, but again, I'm
Yeah.
sure you see it by the fact that you're calling it out as one of your strengths. There's so many people who don't focus on that. It's really it's surprising at times. So that's a great point there. So, you've obviously hit a lot of challenges, as everybody does through your career. What's something that you wish someone had told you? Thinking of, if you're a student coming out of college, you're about to enter the workforce, you have on those rose-colored glasses of how awesome it's going to be, right? What's one thing you wish someone had told you as a reality check before you started work?
Um, I think one of the maybe the biggest things, this sounds so silly, but start your 401k immediately. I don't know why, and I think my parents probably told me to. Maybe I was trying to save every penny of my paycheck, but I didn't start it for 5 years, and I really regret that. So I think again, some of those rose-colored glasses, especially when you're new in your career, some things seem so far down the road, but maybe taking that 401k piece is just a theme of start thinking through some of your long-term planning, whether that's financial or just in your career, and really even though you're so new, focus on kind of what are my goals and what do I need to be doing now to achieve those.
Wow, that is not a typical answer, but I love that answer. I have been obsessed with personal finance since I first started, and I can tell you that what I'd encourage anyone to do. I remember an article, golly, way back when I was in college, that really converted me. That talked about how if somebody started at 25 and saved $2,000 a year, that was back when an IRA was $2,000 max, 2,000 a year for just 10 years till they're 35, and never saved another penny under virtually every realistic return scenario, they would have more money forever than someone who started at 35 and put $2,000 in every single year thereafter. And it's because of the fact that getting in early, the money of that person that got in 10 years earlier is already, doubled once and a half, twice, based on depending on what the return is. And now you're playing catch up with that. So yeah, that's something I wish they did more in college, quite honestly, and that there was more, training and onboarding about that, because we're all on our own for retirement today. I know, your parents, my parents, a lot of them had traditional pensions, and those simply don't exist anymore. So as you think about, here at KSU, obviously we've got a lot of bright students coming out with degrees in analytics, data science, and many others as well, looking to get hired. What are some of the traits and skills you most look for when you hire someone, in general or specifically at the entry level?
Yeah, I mean, technical skills, experience with analytics, that's sort of a checkbox we need to make sure we have on anyone that we're hiring. But it's really the non-technical skills that we focus most on, and we've found the technical is easy to train on. Sometimes those non-technical skills are a little bit harder, and if you think back to that consultative approach and things around project management or communication, collaboration, drive, curiosity, looking for those sorts of traits are really what we've found can make someone the most successful. So, I think almost just coming in with that mindset of being able to run each project like it's your own business, and not just bringing the technical skills to the table.
And let's say you have a student coming into their first job. What might be a piece of advice you'd give, to someone early in their career? They really want to, develop themselves and over time get ahead. What are some of the things they can do in those early days to help set themselves up for that?
Yeah. I think, raise your hand, think about what excites you, making sure even maybe before you start, you're looking for companies that match that profile. So you're enthusiastic about what you're doing every day. Um, you know, research employee satisfaction, use LinkedIn to see how long employees have been with companies, how much growth they've had with the company. I like to really encourage technical students to use recruiters. Most of those are paid for by the company. We often help find talent through recruiters over the years. So leverage them to see what's out there. But then once you're in that role, again, I think it's volunteering, it's raising your hand, it's being very curious, asking questions. If don't be afraid that because you're new, oh, maybe I should know this. I'm not going to ask how this work I'm doing is connecting to the business. It's actually a really good trait when people ask a lot of questions. And, it's something we like to see from people in their first, 90 days, 6 months, 1 year, a lot of questions, because that's how we know you're really working to connect the dots between the business and the work you're doing, and we're making sure we're communicating clear enough, and helping educate as well. So those would probably be a few pieces.
It's interesting. You mentioned about working through recruiters, getting a job. I think a lot of students, everyone knows you got to get a good resume, but these days, I know more than one recruiter. The little phrase says, "If you're not on LinkedIn, you don't exist." So you've got to also, not only are you researching people on LinkedIn in preparation for that interview, if you're smart, but they're going to want to research you. And even if you're just a student without a whole lot to put in there, you better have a LinkedIn profile that's complete, that lists some of your skills and your interests, because it's honestly almost more important than the resume, because a lot of the people that are going to interview you are going to look up on LinkedIn, and they won't look at the resume till it's time, and they're kind of sitting looking at that as part of the interview process.
Yeah, and especially, companies like Comcast, we have internal recruiters, we have external recruiters. So I often lean on them to look through the resume and make sure it's a good fit. So to your point, often I'm not putting my eyes on the resume until the time of the interview, but I have looked at the LinkedIn. And I do think, practice, make sure you're practicing for interviews. You want to make sure you're presenting yourself in the best light. You're getting across, what you think makes you stand apart. So don't take that for granted. Make sure you practice and kind of think through what are the components I want to make sure I communicate while I'm in this interview.
I'll tell you what, before we run out of time here, I guess we'll close with a question for you. As you look out a couple of years from now, what is a trend that you either see emerging already, or one that hasn't yet emerged but that you think will, that's going to have a huge impact on the space 3 to 5 years down the road?
Yeah. We're already dabbling a lot in machine learning and natural language processing. And so I think that will continue to evolve and get more intertwined with our operations instead of just being leveraged more for analytics. Um, but I actually think it kind of ties back to some of what we've talked through earlier of my advice is maybe to not get too tied to, one technology or one approach, and making sure it almost doesn't matter, how technical you are if you don't know what you're trying to answer or what you're trying to do with the data. Um, so I think, just keeping that focus and that grounding on making sure I understand the business, making sure I'm thinking through, what am I trying to solve here? And then once you've landed that, then I think that's where you can really use collaboration and innovation and kind of design thinking to say, okay, now what's my best technology? And there's so many great options, but almost really making sure you're grounding on what am I trying to solve first, and how is it going to drive impact, and then think through what's the best and coolest way for me to get there.
Well, thanks so much. I'll just say, for anyone who's listening who happens to go to an Atlanta Braves game or any other event at Truist Park, Christine, your office, if I recall, literally the building is directly next to the field, and you can see when you're going to walk into the stadium, you'll see the big Comcast sign, and that's where you sit in normal times.
Yep, the sign should be lit up at night. If you're at a night game from in the stadium, you can see it. From the top floor in the building at Comcast, you can see the whole diamond. It's a very exciting place to work, especially on game day. So looking forward to when we return to office and get to feel that enthusiasm.
Yeah, I'll have to see that view from that top floor once. Uh,
It's awesome.
anyway, well, thank you so much for coming today. I think you had some great insights, and I appreciate you joining the show.
Thank you.